This week on Launch Stories.
UiPath just came to the market at the perfect time with a newer product that some of the other competitors at the right time when the demand started surging. And that rounded up with an execution as close to perfection as I've ever seen, just brought the amazing success.
Welcome to Launch Stories, the global startup podcast. I'm your host, Zoltan Vardy. The Launch Stories podcast gives you a taste of what it takes to launch a global startup. Listen to founders share their personal ups and downs, their professional wins and losses, and the lessons they've learned along the way to building an international company. You'll also hear from accelerators and investors that support entrepreneurs along their journey around the world and what they think is the recipe for startup success. So join me on Launch Stories. Get inspired and learn the ingredients of a successful global business. My guest today is Ondrej Bartos. Ondrej is co-founder and general partner of Credo Ventures, a venture capital firm based in the Czech Republic that focuses on early-stage investments in Central Europe. Ondrej was a pioneer in Central Europe's emerging startup scene in the early 2000s, first by organizing startup networking events, and later with the launch of Credo in 2009. His role as a trendsetter culminated this past February, when Credo's portfolio company, Romanian tech startup UiPath, went public on the New York Stock Exchange at a staggering $35 billion valuation. I'll be talking to Ondrej today about how Central and Eastern Europe's startup ecosystem has evolved over the past 2 decades, and what it took to find and make a seed investment in the most financially successful startup ever to come out of this region. Let's listen to his launch story. Welcome, Ondrej. Thanks so much for joining me.
Hi, Zoltan. Thanks for having me.
So this has been an amazing and remarkable year for you guys. Tell me, what were you thinking in February of this year when you experienced the fact that UiPath had gone public?
I was happy. It felt good. I'm not going to lie. I think so. The interesting part of being a VC investor is that you actually sort of actively work with the startups in your portfolio, and also you're trying to find the new amazing startups. So from the perspective of an ordinary course of business, it did not change much, right? We were still working on all this.
Doing the day-to-day grind of listening to pitches and making decisions.
Exactly. So nothing changed there much, except UiPath already didn't need me much. That was not like since this April or February. That's been for the past 2 years already or something.
I see. Well, listen, we'll get into the UiPath story in a moment because it is such an unusual and fascinating story. But before we do, I want to take a step back a little bit in history and ask you about the early days of the tech startup scene in Central Europe. What do you remember from those days? I believe you were launching kind of networking events in the Czech Republic and Slovakia. And how does your experience from back then inform your view of the startup ecosystem of the region as it is today?
I am fully aware of the fact that I'm kind of a dinosaur of the tech startup world in Central Europe. I started running networking events for startups and investors and people around in 1999, which means that I already sort of experienced the first .com bubble, and it was an amazing time, actually. As much as I'm aware of all the bad and ugly and nasty about it, what I remember was that it was actually a pretty exciting time to be there in the startup world. I also remember that startups were not a thing in Central Europe.
In fact, they were called internet companies. I mean, that happened to have been my first entrepreneurial experience as well. They were internet companies because the internet was sort of the platform, right?
They were called internet companies or .com companies. Some people tried using the term new economy, which kind of failed because many others argued that there was no new economy. It was still the good old economy just on the internet. It was very different. When I entered the startup world, it was new, it was niche, it was unknown, sort of mass market, which was both good and bad, right? The downside of it was that not too many people understood what I was doing and what kind of business I was a part of.
Did your family say, when are you going to get a real job?
My family never told me what to do or what not to do, but I'm pretty positive they didn't know what I was doing. I was telling them that I worked in an office with a computer. And that was the extent. That was the extent of their knowledge about what I did.
And I think in your bio, you actually say that you realized relatively early on you didn't have what it takes to make truly successful entrepreneurs. So you became a consultant and an angel investor. What was your thinking there? Did you make an attempt at launching your own business?
I started my first company in '96. So that was really, really early days. But that was not an internet company. I studied business. I launched a consulting company and conference organizing company back in '96, which was sort of mediocre success. It paid the bills. It meant that me as a student, I had always a bit more money than the other students in college, but there was nothing groundbreaking. Then I was together with 3 co-founders. We started the first internet company or software company in 1998. So yeah, I did have the entrepreneur/founder experience. But what I meant when I said that I discovered that I did not have what was needed, that's because I realized that I didn't like company building and people management. Whenever my companies grew to the size of like 15 people, I already started to be sick of it. And
dealing with all the day-to-day hassle.
I wanted out. So I was not suited to be an entrepreneur of the year. I was also not suited to be a corporate guy, not enjoying the people management or management in general. Yeah, so I turned a consultant and I guess event organizer with the startup networking events.
How many people would show up at these events back then?
When we started, we had around 70, 80 people coming. Then it grew throughout 2001, 2002, we had up to 400, 450 in Prague, and we had a bit smaller events in Brno, second largest city in the Czech Republic. So it was a community of a couple of thousand people by, say, 2003, 2004.
Well, certainly it's an interesting comparison. Now you have what seems like some sort of startup or tech conference every week somewhere in Europe, with thousands and thousands of people attending and speaking and taking part. So you can even see the evolution of the entire startup ecosystem through that change.
That is right.
Where do you see the current environment for startups in Central and Eastern Europe as we sit here today, looking at it from the founder perspective and then the investor perspective?
The whole ecosystem has evolved tremendously. And again, it has a good side to it. It has a bad side, right? The good part is that I don't think there has ever been a better time for founders, for entrepreneurs to raise capital. There's a lot of money out there in the market. Startups now are a lot more better known out there, everybody, and they're sexy, they're attractive. Working in a startup no longer is a niche, unknown, or even a weird thing. It's now a pretty cool thing actually to be in startups. But again, the bad thing is actually very similar. Sometimes what I see out there in the market is that some people just want to do startups because they're cool and because they want to be a part of this sexy thing without necessarily having the substance, the competence. And not always people fully understand what it means to start a startup or do the startup thing. For many people, it's more about the lifestyle and being hip and cool rather than work really hard.
I say that all the time when I speak to my own clients and just generally to people who are not necessarily in the depths of the startup environment. It is a case to the tip of the iceberg, right? I mean, what you see on the cover of Forbes is literally just the top 5% of what actually goes on in order to generate a business that deserves to be on the cover of Forbes. The other 95% is a ton of hard work and uncertainty and difficult decisions and a bit of luck to get you to that point.
Yeah. So, and many people don't quite get it. And I don't want to sound too old. It's not necessarily a bad thing. Technologies are super exciting and there are amazing things that can be done with technologies. And there are still, I truly believe it, there are still amazing technologies to be built. But will everybody in startups get rich or famous or successful? Definitely not. Most of them will ultimately fail and go to corporate world or turn their business into sort of a lifestyle profit making or moderate profit making companies. And that's okay. Only the really most amazing, lucky, outstanding founders will build something big.
I mean, given that there's such a huge failure rate for startups, what do you think are the particularly disadvantages of maybe building a startup in this part of the world, in Central and Eastern Europe? And what are some of the advantages potentially of doing so?
Disadvantages, I guess, lie mainly in sort of the cultural context of Central and Eastern Europe, in which historically we have never favored risk taking, and the society usually tended not to tolerate failures and stuff. So it's almost like counterintuitive to go into startups, into something that has such high risk of failure. But there are also, many advantages. And again, I hope it does not come out as a cliche, but I truly believe that people in Central and Eastern Europe are very creative and innovative, and they also have this talent for improvisation, I feel like. So I feel like in Central Europe, there's a lot of talent. And also the educational system and the schools here, I feel like are very good, mainly the technical ones, which then leads to the fact that I believe we have great engineers, great programmers, which means that we're a very good region to start good technology companies in.
Would you agree that in general, companies that come out of Central and Eastern Europe are stronger technically founded companies and less market-focused companies or sales and marketing-driven companies?
Yeah, I mean, it is a generalization, and every generalization is not fully accurate. But as a generalization, I would tend to agree. Yes.
So, how do you, as an investor, deal with that? How do you manage that situation where you're facing companies or potential investments that are strong technically, but don't necessarily have the necessary sales and marketing skill on board in order to achieve the success that you as an investor would expect?
I think so. We're trying to take it as a sort of a base, a fact, and work with it and try to use it as an advantage. So we are believers in substance. We believe that technical expertise and solid products and tech should ultimately win in the market globally. And what we do with our startups in our portfolio is we try helping them in the sales and marketing competence and in the sort of go-to-market set of skills. Very often where we start after we invest is helping out the founding team, which is usually technical, to hire first sales and marketing roles, look for the first head of sales or chief revenue officer, look for sort of the head marketer, CMO, or whatever you call it again. And not only helping them to find those roles, but also sort of explain them how those roles are important and complementary to what they do. Because again, as a generalization of sort, technical founders sometimes don't understand that, right? Sometimes they feel like a solid product will sell itself, which usually is not the case. But yeah, so we take it as it is. and we're trying to sort of help.
Well, certainly two technical founders who understood the importance of building a market-driven business are Daniel Dinesh and Mario Stirka, the co-founders of UiPath. And I just want to talk a little bit about that, and particularly Credo's role in the amazing success that UiPath has experienced. Before I do, though, I want to share some basic information about the company's history and some statistics for those of our listeners who might not be familiar with the company's background. The predecessor to UiPath, a company called Descover, was founded in 2005 in Bucharest, Romania, as a tech outsourcing company, as a service business, by Romanian entrepreneurs Daniel Dinesh and Mario Stirka. The company released its sort of first product line in 2013, which was based on providing companies with robotic process automation tools, also known as RPA tools, to automate basically manual and repetitive back office tasks, anything from ordering business cards to managing accounts receivable. In 2015 was when the company actually changed its name to UiPath and received a $1.6 million seed funding from Early Bird Venture Capital, from Credo Ventures, your firm, and Seed Camp, and began, I think, what's fair enough to call an explosive growth trajectory. And just to give you a sense of just what that means, so after that $1.6 million seed investment, over the course of 3 years, through 5 funding rounds, the company's valuation grew from $110 million to $10.2 billion, and ultimately culminated in the initial public offering this February at a valuation of $35 billion. So in 5.5 years, it went from $1.6 million investment at a, call it 10, 15, $20 million valuation to a $2 billion funding at a $35 billion valuation, which is just astronomical. Business-wise, the company moved its headquarters to New York City in 2017. It was ranked the number 2 in Financial Times' FT 1000 ranking of America's fastest growing companies in 2020. And today the company has 3,000 employees working in a skyscraper in Park Avenue in New York and has revenues of about $600 million. So all that means to me that you guys made an amazing find and were able to follow what is clearly a very unusual growth path for a company out of Central and Eastern Europe. Tell us how you discovered UiPath, which at the time was had, I believe, something like 10 or 15 employees and less than $1 million in revenue. Paint a picture here. Pretend Steven Spielberg wants to do the story of the founding of UiPath. What do I see? What's that first meeting like with the founders? What happens there in that first communication with them?
You just got me thinking about who would be an actor to play me in that movie, but let's try to step aside. So listen, so first I heard about UiPath in December 2014 from a friend of mine, an investor in Romania, Dan at Early Bird, who actually found UiPath, and he made the intro. First, I spoke to Danielle on Google Meet because I think Zoom did not exist back then.
Right.
And that was January 2015. In a sense, it felt like a very usual Central and Eastern European story in terms of, Daniel was very technical. He was an engineer himself. He actually, was the one to write the code at the beginning, right? And before that, he was an engineer in Microsoft before they started Descover and hustled.
Well, he actually worked for Microsoft in the States, I believe, right, for about 5 years, I think, before, and he moved back to Romania.
He was in the US. He was in Redmond and then got back to Romania, did the Descover thing, which was a pure hustle, Eastern European hustle, a software house doing whatever they could do and sell, SDKs and stuff, scraping. And then, eventually sort of discovered the software robots or, the automation via software robots. What was different, it felt like a pretty usual story in terms of a very technical founder with a very deep understanding of the space and intimate knowledge of the product and tech. What was a bit unusual was how strategic he was already back then. about the whole market. What was unusual was how great his vision and his ambition was. I just really liked the conversation. I really liked the guy. I knew he was definitely someone I could back. I just needed to sort of double check on the market and the opportunity. It was the first time I heard about something called RPA. So I guess I spent the following couple of weeks trying to sort of validate what Daniel was talking about, get more comfortable with the whole sort of opportunity, size of the opportunity. In 2015, the RPA market was tiny. And although some of the research firms predicted growth, I don't think anybody predicted that much growth. And also, it was actually before we clearly could see the path to sort of AI, and before we discovered that RPA was actually a very elegant way how to get AI or first elements of AI into enterprise.
And Ondrej, how close were you to walking away from that investment?
It's really difficult to tell in retrospect. Even if I were, I'm not sure I would tell you that I was.
Okay, well that says something.
But trying to be really open here, I really liked it from the very beginning, and all the diligence that we did in the winter and spring 2015, I think kept sort of validating that this is something that's very, very interesting.
So Ondrej, you made the investment in summer of 2015. And so less than 2 years later, which isn't that long of a time, the company gets a $30 million investment from Excel partners, and I guess US seed investors join that. And then it begins this unbelievable growth path. Literally, it seems like every 6 months there's a new founding at a astronomical growth in valuation. What do you see at that period of time, that following 2.5, 3 years? What is driving this unbelievable growth in valuation?
I think there are many elements, and it's kind of superficial to sort of limit it to just a bunch of things. It was, some people would call a perfect storm, or stars alignment. But if you ask me, I believe there were three big elements behind the success story. One was definitely the founders, like a perfect combo of Daniel and Marius, and especially Daniel just proved to be an absolutely outstanding founder and CEO who I've seen grow so damn much in the past 6 years. That is unbelievable. Not, I don't know many other people. Probably I don't know any other people who would be capable of such growth, personal growth. The second was the market, which just started demand for RPA, for this kind of automation, just surged amazingly. And the third one that's very much connected with the second one would be timing. Just UiPath was so damn well timed to the market, which, to a certain extent was a matter of luck. UiPath was not the first one in the market doing RPA. That would have been Blue Prism out of the UK. But UiPath just came to the market at the perfect time with a newer product that some of the other competitors, at the right time when the demand started surging. And that rounded up with an execution as close to perfection as I've ever seen, just brought the amazing success.
So the right product at the right time in the right market with the right founders. That's the formula for a unicorn.
You said it. It's easy, right?
Sounds pretty easy to me. Exactly. When you look back at UiPath, obviously it's an amazing success. One of many investments you've made. So it's not just obviously your only successful investment. In fact, the reason you and I know each other because we co-invested into a company called Brainient right around, I think it was in 2011, I believe. Also a Romanian startup that had a successful exit. What's next for you guys? I mean, obviously with UiPath behind you, I'm sure your reputation in the industry has skyrocketed. What does it mean for you as a fund? And what does it mean in terms of your evaluation of future opportunities? Are you only looking for billion-dollar opportunities at this stage?
All good questions. So, I mean, to start with, I would not necessarily say that our reputation has skyrocketed, right? It's still, we're a 10-year or 11 years old venture firm in a remote geography of Central Europe, and we've had an amazing success, and hopefully a couple of more still coming. But it's not like we became with UiPath's IPO, we became a Sequoia. That's not what happened. What has changed, I think, is when we started and when we started going to Silicon Valley or to the UK, talk with other VCs and corporates, I feel like nobody took us too seriously, right? Well, first of all, we were small, new, unknown. And second of all, we came from Central Europe, which was not a thing 10 years ago, right? This has been significantly changing. And one of the reasons is UiPath, but not only UiPath. If you take a look at Central and Eastern Europe, there have been good success stories pretty much all across, right? There's the, InfoBip story in Croatia. There are Rimac in Croatia, and LogMeIn in Hungary, and Avast in the Czech Republic, and so forth. So there has been more and more going on in our region. And then also, in particular, the UiPath story led to the fact that other VCs in Silicon Valley and other sort of startup centers globally started taking us more seriously.
Good. Well, listen, I hope you guys can take advantage of that in the coming months and years as you look to continue to build Credo Ventures as one of the leading venture capital firms, not just in Central Europe, but hopefully in Europe in the future as well. So I want to thank you, Ondrej, for your time.
Thank you, Zoltan.
Thanks, everyone, for joining me on Launch Stories, the Global Startup Podcast. I hope you got inspired and learned some ingredients of a successful global business. If you like what you heard, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your friends.